Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Omega, and today I'm going to be wrapping up our journey with homeschooling with this final part 3. Last week I left off with us moving out of our RV and coming down to Southern California. So let's just jump right in. It's about May 2017. By this time, Connor is a well-established reader. The kid didn't go anywhere without a book. And it's like, a dream come true for me. I love it. We're getting in a good flow with science and history and writing. I had stumbled across Brave Writer right around this time, and I took this move as the time where I was going to just jump in and learn Brave Writer. I'd had the program for about a year, but there's just so much going on, you guys, that it gets put on the shelf and life moves on. So during this move, surprisingly, I had a lot of time on my hands, and I basically let the kids kind of be and play. Connor was into reading. My other 3 didn't care about learning, so I was like, okay, I'm going to teach myself how to use Brave Writer using the Writer's Jungle. I spent probably about a month going through that, finding a new place to live. It was lots of transitions, and because we, were living in an RV, expenses were low, and then moving back down to Southern California was like, oh my goodness, this is a bit much. So I ended up picking up a couple jobs. I nannied in the morning. There was a great gal I met, and I watched her 2 kids while she went and taught. And then in the afternoon, I would go work for 8 hours. And it was a transition phase, but I was so thankful for the year prior of giving Connor his lead in education and help, teaching him and mentoring him to be in charge of what he's learning, because he at that point was independent. He taught himself anything new he wanted to learn. The only struggle that we had was math, and at this time I discovered Math Inspirations, and it changed my whole viewpoint on math. Now, at the time I couldn't implement it with Connor because I was working. I'd get up at 5:30. The kids would get dropped off at 6 in the morning, and then I had them till just after lunch. I had a couple of free hours, and then I was off to work for 8 hours, sometimes getting home around, midnight. And yeah, it was rough. It was a struggle, but I was so thankful that Connor was an independent learner at this time. My littles couldn't care less, right? They were just like, we're just going to play all day, which going through leadership education, I was totally fine with. I didn't stress or freak out that they weren't doing academics. I was okay with them playing and just being little kids. So it was totally a great moment for me to be able to go back to work. Again, it was hard, you guys, I'm not gonna lie, trying to squeeze in teaching in a couple hours. Thankfully, I was able to still do like the core things with my kids. We played with blocks. We basically played while I was watching the other 2 little boys. They just kind of joined in with our read aloud time, our story time, our building with blocks and Legos. It was actually really fun. I was exhausted. That was the only major downside. So I wasn't able to keep that up for very long. It was probably, 4 months that I was able to do both, or all 3 things of, nannying and homeschooling and working. So eventually I wasn't able to nanny, and I just stuck with homeschooling and, having my job. And the summer of 2018, I decided to quit the job, and that's when I was approached by a friend about joining a charter. So I talked to the kids, and there was a few things they all wanted to try parkour. And, it wasn't our budget to do it. And so I met with an EF from the charter school, and I told her, like, hey, we are unschooled. My kids don't follow any sort of, structured curriculum or grade level or expectation. Will this work? And her words to me were, we are here to help you as the parent, but you are in charge of their education. There were, some things that they had to do, and I let them know, like, hey, if you want to be part of this program, these are the things you have to do. You have to actually do school every day. You have to, do worksheets. We weren't a big worksheet family at that time. And I'm like, you need to, these are the rules. And so they talked about it. Connor was like, yeah, I can do that. Oren was like, sure. Liam and Fiona were more hesitant, but we just talked about, like, if you want to take parkour, this learning is going to be your job. You're basically being paid to learn, so you have to hold up your end of the bargain. And they agreed, so they jumped in, doing reading lessons, doing math inspirations, history, science, they fell into our regular routine that I had set up. We were doing loop scheduling for a couple years by this point. And so they were already following along with Loop 2. If you don't know what that is, check out my looping video. But I had set up times for them to, do their learning and do their reading, math, things like that. And we stuck with the charter for a couple years. To be honest, as a private homeschooler, I felt it to be restricting because there was this pressure to keep up. There was testing that had to be done, and I didn't pass that pressure on to my kids, but I definitely felt it. And Connor was going to be going into high school, and he had his own plans about what he wanted to study and when he wanted to study it, and there seemed to be some conflict with the charter, so I had decided that I was going to pull him for his high school years out of the charter, and he would just be independent and learn what he wanted to learn on his own schedule. Then, restrictions came down, and the charter school environment was changing. It was becoming more structured and rigid, and the pandemic had hit by this point, and I talked to my EF, and she was so fantastic, and she explained, hey, these are the changes coming, and I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to you because I know it's not going to work for your family and your learning lifestyle. I let the kids know. I gave them the option, like, hey, do you want to stay? But, these are the new rules that you have to follow. And all three of them were like, no, we're done. We quit their classes. Well, I guess we weren't really taking classes anymore because, everything was shut down because of the pandemic. But, luckily, they're still able to attend at least one class. We worked it out so they can attend one class instead of the 3 that they were doing. And it was nice to be with the charter while we learned some valuable lessons about, just personal freedoms, like their choice in education and what they wanted to do. So it was an interesting time. For them, I tried to make it as easygoing, organic, and maintain our learning lifestyle of very relaxed, very having them be in charge of their education. As things changed with the charter, we just had to let it go. Once the pandemic hit, we actually realized how busy we'd been with the charter. We were gone probably 4 days out of the week. We were either at classes, doing car schooling, or, out normal life things like grocery shopping. We were hardly ever home. And when everything got shut down, we realized how much we missed just being home and learning at home and it made our loop schedule flow much better. Everybody was a little more relaxed, and it was a really good thing. So it wasn't honestly that bad for us to leave the charter, because we realized like how much it was taking away from what we knew as our learning lifestyle. So that brings us to now, and we're back to being private homeschoolers. We love that. My kids are in charge of their education. I am just kind of the floater that moves from one kid to the next as they need me. And the one thing out of this whole homeschool journey that I've learned, and that's hard to do, is you need to trust your kids. You provide them with what they need. You're there for them when they need you, and you gently push. You offer them opportunities. You get excited about your own learning so that they can see how exciting learning can be. And I'll be honest, I still have those moments where I stress out that my kids aren't on grade level, or they're not in the same, reading levels or math levels as their peers. I'm not sure if that ever goes away entirely. I can usually brush it off because I know what works for my family. I know what works for my kids. But every now and then, yes, I'll be like, oh my goodness, they're not loving it. And I think that is more, not that I want them to keep up, but I tend to get very excited about learning things. That's my hobby. And I've had some people laugh when they ask, what do you do for fun? And I'm like, I do research, or, learn a new curriculum, or learn something new entirely. And they're like, that seems like too much work, but it's really what I love to do. I love learning. And so when I see that my kids don't love it to the extent that I do get a little apprehensive about it and start to freak out. But then I realize, that's my thing. I love learning. They may not. That's okay. It is something that I'll admit I struggle with, because I want them to have that joy and that love. But learning from Connor and, killing his love of learning has taught me not to push it and force it, and just to let it happen organically. So that wraps up our journey from start to now in homeschooling. It's had some bumps, it's had some wins, we've had struggles, there's been tears, there's been laughter, and I honestly can't wait for the rest of it. It's been fun so far. I love being with my kids, and I wouldn't change it at all. So I hope you guys found this video encouraging. If you have any questions, comments, leave them down below. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.